This is the Plagmanrules Podcast. Everybody, welcome. It's Friday, October 6th. And on today's edition of the podcast, we got a couple of stories to look at. First of all, something that just broke, and this is talking about a delay in the Bride of Frankenstein movie, which is supposed to be the second chapter in the Universal Dark Universe. We'll talk about that a little bit. Also, we just got word that Fast and the Furious 9 is going to be pushed back a year to 2020 now for the ninth installment of the franchise. All right, let's get started with this. And we're talking, of course, about The Bride of Frankenstein, which is going to be the second film in the Dark Universe from Universal. And I'll tell you what, the Mummy movie, when it was coming out, when it was first being advertised and everything, even though the trailers weren't fantastic by any means, I was still like, you know what, Tom Cruise is such a superstar, and it is supposed to be the start of a new cinematic universe, which are, all the hubbub these days, so I gave it a shot. And it was the second worst movie of the year. Yeah, not good. So then I thought about it a little bit, and immediately everybody just wanted to jump on the bandwagon of saying, oh, just because this first one failed now, everything else is going to fail. And I was like, well, hold on. We do have, and they had all these various projects that were being talked about and stuff. And we've got like Johnny Depp as the Invisible Man. We had, I can't even remember what everything else was. But the one that probably piqued my curiosity the most was I guess it would be a direct remake of Bride of Frankenstein from Bill Condon, who just did the Beauty and the Beast remake, and Javier Bardem was attached to play Dr. Frankenstein, I believe. If not, he was the actual monster. I can't remember, and I've heard conflicting sources as to who he was going to play. If you do happen to know, let me know in the comments section here, because I've heard many sources both that he's playing the Doctor, and then I've also heard the reverse, that he's actually playing the monster. Either way, he was going to be in it, and he's a talented actor, and also that Angelina Jolie was being looked at to play the actual bride. The one thing that was really making me interested in this is that we have seen over the years, how many, like 20 or 25 different versions and adaptations of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and the various sequels and stuff, and, all these different tropes that are going after the original Universal sequels from the late 30s and 40s. And Bride of Frankenstein, if you look back at those old movies, I know it's black and white, so all you millennials don't even want to acknowledge it, but The Bride of Frankenstein is perhaps one of the greatest sequels ever made. And it's one that, if you haven't watched it, go back and watch it. It's only like an hour and 20 minutes or whatever. It's a short movie. It's not super long. And it's really great. And you get into the story, you pick up on some of the characters from the first movie, and it's really, really a good watch. And, if you're a fan like me of like Young Frankenstein, the 70s spoof movie, there's probably more comparisons to that movie, to Bride of Frankenstein, than there are to the original Frankenstein, arguably. So, to hear that they were going to introduce Frankenstein and the lore of Frankenstein and the monster and the bride and all the scientists and all the lab experiments and everything, to hear they were going to introduce it not in a direct remake or a direct adaptation of the first Frankenstein novel and only stick with that and not even get into the other stuff, but to hear they were going to start with Bride of Frankenstein, presumably in a spot to where all the events of Frankenstein that everybody and their kids and their grandkids know by heart, how Frankenstein happens, to start after that has happened, and now we start with, well, this is where the monster takes the mate, or whatever the original tagline was. To start there, I thought was interesting and really just a different idea. And yes, we're not looking at a direct adaptation of the original Frankenstein once again, because we just had one a couple years ago, Victor Frankenstein, and nobody saw it, and I don't think anybody was really interested in seeing it. So now we get this one, and plus one more thing, Bill Condon, he kind of got his name first from directing Gods and Monsters, which was about James Whale, who was, of course, the director of the original Frankenstein and The Bride of Frankenstein, so there's that connection there as well. So to see him kind of come full circle on that, I think would have been a real treat. And supposedly, that is still happening. As far as I'm seeing here, we're not seeing Javier Bardem, Angelina Jolie, or Bill Condon go away from the project. The only thing is that they are pulling away from the original release date, which was set for Valentine's Day of 2019. Now, if they were going to make that, yeah, that means they were going to have to pretty much start shooting this, like, in January or February of next year. They would have had to start really soon. Now, supposedly the reason that they're pulling the plug on this for now is just to make sure that the script is right and to make sure that it is what they want to do. Now, right away, everybody's talking about this, and they're jumping to the conclusion that the Dark Universe is dead and this thing is never going to see the light of day. Now, first of all, we have to remember, The Mummy, yes, was a critical flop. Yes, was not well received by audiences, but it did make quite a bit of money at the box office. Now, was it enough to really, 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 really be something where the studio says, we got to ignore all those negative words? It made this much money. No, it wasn't like $1 billion movie by any means. In fact, the total is just a little over $400 million. And the production budget, I've heard, is anywhere between $125 to $150 million. Once you factor in that probably comes close to doubling it after marketing, that means you still made close to $100 million, give or take whatever the original production budget was. So that means that it was not a 100% failure. Now, sure, I think that Universal needs to learn some lessons from The Mummy, which is don't throw everything into your movie. That was pretty much, if you go back, I reviewed the movie many months ago, but my big complaint about that was just they threw everything, including the kitchen sink, into the movie, and it just didn't work. It was trying too hard to be a comedy, an action comedy, a horror comedy, also trying to be a straight-up horror movie, trying to be a gothic horror movie, trying to be a Tom Cruise movie, trying to be a summer blockbuster. It was just trying too hard and didn't have enough cohesive elements to make the whole thing work. Instead, it was just a mess. Now, I do think that it's a wise choice to, make sure that your script is as good as it can be. But at the same time, when you have talents like Bill Condon, like Javier Bardem, and David Koepp, I believe, is the most recent person they've announced to be writing on the script, those people know what they're doing. And Angelina Jolie, I should say, she was never 100% confirmed from what I've read. So, I don't know, maybe she is now and I just missed it. But supposedly she's in it too. But then we've also heard this week that Maleficent 2 is also getting ready to go. What the hell is that doing? So this is really a question to me of, okay, are they gonna just fix the script because it needs work? Or is, if it is a thing to where they really, really, really want Angelina Jolie and now her schedule has been pushed back because of the Maleficent stuff, maybe that's part of it too. I don't think that would be the main concern. If that was the case, I think they would really just say, okay, well, let's pick somebody else in that case. Because I swear, even though Maleficent, again, wasn't well received by audiences, wasn't well received by critics, it did make money, and actually a lot more money than The Mummy did. I just don't know if Angelina personally would want to go back to, I don't know her myself, but if I were her, I would not do the Maleficent stuff. Instead, I would read the script of Bride of Frankenstein that they have, or, whatever they're working on now on that, and if it's good, I would take it. But, we don't know yet. Does this mean that the Dark Universe is over? Again, I'm saying no. So what this is telling me is that they're going to try and look over a couple of the mistakes they made in The Mummy and try to really tighten the bolts here, so to speak, and get this movie into a spot to where it doesn't matter when it's coming out or what, it's going to make us forget The Mummy and say, this is really where we're starting. And hopefully that's the case. Hopefully that's what happens here. But at the same time, it's a thing to where, we haven't heard any news lately on what Johnny Depp's doing in that Invisible Man movie. We haven't heard much on, are they still trying to get all these other different projects off the ground, like a different version of Van Helsing, or like a different version of Creature of the Black Lagoon, and what about the Wolfman? Because we still have all these different universal monsters and creatures and stuff from the 30s and 40s that we haven't gotten to yet. The Mummy was just one of many, many different ones they could choose from there. So let's see what happens here, but for now, I am not going to jump on the bandwagon of this is the end, let's abandon ship here. Okay, this next one, talking about Fast and Furious 9, being delayed a year. Now, that in and of itself is actually something that I kind of celebrate because I'm not a big fan of these movies. I saw the 7th one in the theater, I've seen the 5th and the 6th one on television, and I haven't seen the 8th one yet. The other 4 I have not come anywhere near, so I'm not a fan of this franchise, not really. The 7th one was kind of a fun watch in the theater, even if it is, ridiculous and stuff. That's kind of what they're building on here as the franchise. It's kind of that dumb popcorn munching fun, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, every once in a while you have to kind of watch one of those movies. But I'm kind of thankful that they're pushing this back, because the schedule was 2015, we got Fast and Furious 7. Then 2017, this year, we got Fast and Furious 8. The plan was 2019 for Fast and the Furious 9, and then I think it was 2021 for Fast and the Furious 10, if they ever get there. When you do have a franchise that does that every other year thing, usually that's when I start to get a little concerned, because, well, maybe you're wearing yourself out here. Now, obviously, we do have counterexamples here. Like, of course, Star Wars is doing this every other year thing, where every other year they'll either have a spin-off movie or a new episode come out. And it's like, well, I should explain that better. It's every year we get a Star Wars movie and they alternate. And so far that's worked out, but we're only 2 films in. We have to remember the Fast and Furious franchise is up to number 8 now. And my concern was, I think Universal was a little taken aback when Fast and Furious 8 did not make the $1.5 billion that Fast and Furious 7 did. Now, it's sad but true, but the reason Fast 7, or Furious 7, whatever it was called, I always confuse the title of these movies too, but Furious 7 made $1.5 billion because they had a really, really good send-off to an actor who passed away during the production of the movie. It's sad but true, but the morbid curiosity was what brought in all those hundreds of millions of dollars that were not really planning on seeing the movie. And they had a great marketing campaign at the time, and the way that movies were going at that time, as far as the month, I mean, it was released, I believe, in April, and there wasn't a lot of competition out at the time, and we were still waiting on, like, the second Avengers movie and a couple other summer blockbusters there, and one of those was Mad Max as well, and we wanted something in the meantime here, and perfect. That's right when Furious 7 came out. So I think that was kind of like It we saw last month, where it just got that perfect storm into the box office and became a bigger hit than anybody could have guessed. So when they were talking about Fast and Furious 8, especially opening weekend back in April of this year, I was saying it's not going to get anywhere near what the 7th one did, which I think was, what, 140 million or so, roughly? Maybe 150? I forget what the actual number was. But it was much bigger than what the Fate of the Furious did, which was the 8th one. And I said the reason that is because Paul Walker is not in this one. And not to say he was the biggest draw of the franchise ever, but it's because of that morbid curiosity factor being gone this time. I mean, it's a sad fact, but it's something we have to acknowledge it. We have to acknowledge that the reason Fast 7 was so popular was because, hey, we had a great send-off to really the star of this franchise. And that's, of course, there's arguments all over the world of who the actual big star of the franchise is. But a lot of people are going to say that the big one is The Rock, and definitely you can see that uptick in the box office after he entered in the 5th film. Each one kind of, progressively was earning more and more until we hit Fast and Furious 8. But I'm kind of glad that they're doing this year delay, because now we're not really going to get really oversaturated with these movies. Because we have to remember, they're putting 9 in the title, supposedly. We don't know what the full title's going to be yet. But supposedly they're going to do the play on words like they did last time, or it's going to be Fast 9 or Furious 9 or something. They're going to come up with some excuse to put 9 in the title. So that kind of drains on the movie-going audience. They're like, wow, it's up to number 9 now? Especially if it's coming only 2 years after the last one. And of course, like we said, there's counter-arguments to this. But it's almost a thing of, well, didn't they just make one of those? Oh, I didn't see it. I'm going to have to catch up on that one before I see this one. There goes, $20, $30. And it's not just one person saying that. There's a lot of people saying that. And Fast Furious 8 did not make the kind of money that Fast 7 did. So I think that's going to be kind of, the chain reaction kind of start there. And I think if Fast 9 had come out in 2019, I think that would have been the case. But now that it's 2020, that gives audiences an extra year for Fast 8 to, go up on all the TV channels and all that. And it's also a thing to where when they start advertising it, it's like, oh, that's right. I haven't seen one of those movies in 3 years now it's been. That's right. And I think that draws up your attention span and definitely will increase your audience. So I think that's a smart move. Now, also that gives you the chance to where, hey, if you had a really crappy script for the 9th movie and you weren't really solid on it, or you don't have a director locked down yet, that's a good opportunity to do it. Plus, we heard a few months ago that Michelle Rodriguez was really on the ropes of not coming back to the franchise. Maybe they're going to work out a deal with her. All right, ladies and gents, that's going to do it for today's edition of the podcast. We didn't get to any of the reviews here. I have a review ready for Kingsman and also for American Made. I also did see Stronger recently. I haven't finished the review on that, so maybe we can get to those next week. And of course, we'll talk about the weekend box office on Monday. And really about the only other thing I can say here before we close off today is I did pre-record the show that went up Monday on Sunday, so obviously all the events that had occurred both on Sunday evening and throughout the day on Monday had not occurred yet. But I just wanted to just briefly speak about, to kind of close off the show here, did kind of briefly want to share my thoughts on what happened on Monday with Las Vegas and, of course, with the passing of Tom Petty. Let me just start with Tom Petty here. I'm not like the biggest diehard fan of Tom Petty by any means, but he was a very gifted part of the music culture of the 80s, 90s, and all that stuff. He was just a gigantic personality and somebody who will be missed in the music industry, and definitely somebody who I think deserves, like, if there, I don't know if there is one already, but a good documentary or, even a biopic could potentially happen with him. But I would love to learn more about him. Personally, I didn't know much about his personal life, and I kind of just, know a few of his songs and stuff here and there. So just something that I wanted to mention there was, it's too bad we lost him, and I think it is something to mourn in the community of the music industry. So brief thoughts on that. Now, as I said on the last show there, I did actually celebrate my birthday on Monday, and of course what happened Sunday night was just awful, what happened in Las Vegas. So at the time, obviously in the show, I didn't really have any somber tunes or anything. This is actually something I put out on Facebook on Tuesday, right after the fact and stuff, and I said a huge thanks to all of my friends and family who wished me a happy birthday on Monday. Turned out to be a pretty crappy day, all things considered, with the death of a legend in the music community and another 527 people having the worst day of their lives. Then when you account for the friends and loved ones of the 59 who did lose their lives, which I'm sure is an even bigger number than 527, it's really horrifying. And I wanted to go on there, but I wanted to say that as far as my stance on this stuff, how many kicks in the pants do we need before we figure out this stuff with gun control? Seriously. So, I don't want to go off into a whole political rant here by any means, but how many other lives have to be lost? How many more lives have to be lost? How many more lives have to be maimed before we figure all this shit out? I just personally am not understanding on that. So I continued, still, we don't choose the day we were born, and what matters more than anything is to remember that it's still your day no matter what else happens. Thank you all for making it my day. So I just wanted to share that. Let's go ahead and close it off here. I'll be back on Monday talking about the weekend box office numbers, and if we have time, we'll get to the reviews. We'll see what else happens over the weekend here. All right, until then, this has been the Plagmanrules Podcast.